talk. So thank you so much for joining as people continue to join. Just wanted to welcome everyone and to today's funder roundtable on philanthropy supporting Ukraine in partnership with Philanthropic Foundations Canada, the Mott Foundation, and Community Foundations of Canada. We welcome you to today's conversation on Ukraine's green economy future. A few reminders before we get started. We encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, pronouns, and organization, and we encourage you to rename yourself in the participant list. If you hover over the participant list, click on your name to rename yourself. We have automated live transcript available. If you select at the bottom of your Zoom screen the option to show captions or view full transcript. If you have any technical difficulties, please Zoom chat myself or any of the council staff on this call, and we'll be able to assist you. This conversation is being recorded and will be shared alongside an event summary with key takeaways and resources. Please feel free to share this information far and wide across your networks. Lastly, this is a conversation, and so we encourage you to share your questions, comments, and feedback by utilizing the Zoom chat feature and engage in today's conversation. Welcome again. We're so grateful that you've joined us for today's conversation on Ukraine's green economy future. Today's event is a part of ongoing effort to support philanthropic organizations on the ongoing and widespread relief, recovery, and rebuilding efforts as a result of Russia's war on Ukraine. Since March of 2022, we have hosted partnered events and provided a resource page to support and guide this ongoing response. Our responsiveness will continue with updated webpage and future conversations. So please reach out if there are any topics that you would like to see in the future. We thank you for your continued support and commitment. At this time, I am pleased to hand it over to today's moderator, Adrian, former Ukrainian Service Chief of Voice of America. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate that. I'm Adrian Karmazin. Thanks everyone for joining us today. To start off, I'd just like to take a moment to set the stage a bit regarding the idea or concept of Ukraine's green economy future. Despite the fact that Russia continues to bombard Ukraine and its infrastructure, a lot of smart people are drawing up proposals for rebuilding the country. Experts are recognizing that this horrific war has created an opportunity to transform Ukraine into a green economy country that can be a model for the global fight against climate change. A big part of that is renewable energy, of course, replacing destroyed or damaged coal-fired power plants with solar and wind energy, for example. But a green economy is so much more than that. It's an economy that is entirely based on or guided by environmentalist principles. It's rebuilding destroyed homes, offices, and schools with LED lighting, better insulation, and efficient appliances. It's startups designing software to integrate a mix of sustainable energy sources to ensure a continuous, reliable, and seamless flow of energy supplies. A green economy entails government and businesses reducing or eliminating the use of paper and moving to all electronic records keeping. And Ukraine's actually made a lot of progress on that with its very popular DIA app. It's city managers creating more green spaces, parks, walkable downtowns, and bike lanes, and employing best practices in new construction zoning. It's NGOs and think tanks tracking legislation and executive orders to make sure they promote environmentally friendly services, such as recycling, electrified public transportation, EV charging stations, and so much more. The list goes on and on. And to talk about all these opportunities, we have three excellent speakers. Yevheniya Kravchuk, a member of parliament from President Zelensky's Servant of the People Party. Dario Liguti, Director of the Sustainable Energy Division of the UN Economic Commission for Europe, and Roman Zinchenko, co-founder of Greencubator, an NGO that supports green innovation and the development of green economy ecosystems in Ukraine at the local level. So let's turn now to our speakers. We'll start off with Yevheniya Kravchuk. We're truly grateful to Yevheniya for joining us today, to making the time. Yevheniya's had a very busy travel schedule this summer. She's been representing Ukraine at international forums in Western Europe and Western Canada, and last week in Africa and Rwanda. And this week's been a busy session in Parliament. So Yevheniya, we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today about how you see Ukraine's green economy future. Run us through a little bit about the ecocide that Russia's been causing in Ukraine, all the severe damage to Ukraine's infrastructure and environment, and talk to us a little bit about how you see funders, philanthropy participating in this green Ukrainian future. Yevheniya?
Yes, thank you, Adrian. Thank you for inviting. Thank you all for joining in this midsummer time when everyone wants to chill somewhere near the lake or the sea. Ukraine does not have any vacations, so we work every day. I have sitting of the parliament today. I will have sitting of the parliament tomorrow and the week after. And we'll make our efforts, Ukraine first to win and then to rebuild, of course, but the rebuild has to start as soon as possible. So let me introduce myself. My name is Yevheniya Kravchuk. I'm a member of Ukrainian Parliament. I'm deputy chair of Servant of the People, which is President Zelensky party in the parliament. I'm deputy chair of the Humanitarian Committee, which deals with information policy, humanitarian policy, culture. I'm also very active in parliament diplomacy. I'm now chairing the Committee on Culture, Education, Media and Sports in Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, and also a member of OCPA. And with OCPA, just returned from Canada. I just saw a lot of Canadian logotypes on the presentation, so I greet you as well. I just returned from a great city, Vancouver, and also made a visit to Edmonton and to Alberta province with a lot of Ukrainians living in it. So I will go straight to my notes. I'm sorry if I take more time, just flag that I should shut up and I'll just answer some questions. So first of all, thank you for having me and having this opportunity to talk both about the challenges we face with ecocide, but also with the opportunities that we're open to. Every day, Russia tries to, to kill Ukrainians, to shatter Ukrainian homes, to destroy our cultural heritage, but also it poses a global environmental challenge, and including the destruction of the ecosystems and the physical extermination of species on the territory of Ukraine. But it goes beyond the territories of Ukraine, especially it goes to the territories which are close to the Black Sea region. That's actually the area which is targeted the most. Right now, the environmental damage by the estimate of our authorities, of the Ministry of Ecology, is now $55 billion US. Ukraine is probably the most polluted country in the world with mines, together with the water mines as well. We have lost almost a third of our forests in the hostilities. They were either burned or occupied, and now there are tanks in these forests. It also concerns the Crimea Peninsula, because Crimea is the pearl of Black Sea, and now it's the military base. Also during the year of more than a year of full-scale invasion, greenhouse gas emissions reached hundreds of thousands of tons. Of course, I will stop with the deliberate destruction of the Kakhovka dam, which is a major war crime. As you know, ICC, International Criminal Court, doesn't have ecocide as a separate crime. And I think it's a gap. We have to fill it. But nevertheless, our criminal code, Ukrainian criminal code, has the ecocide as the the crime. So our Secret Service had already started an investigation on it, but also even by the Geneva Convention, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam is the violation of the war, and also it's a war crime because it poses a threat to a lot of civilians. And actually, we have the data that's more than 150 tons of oil leaked into the Dnieper River. It's also the problem was the Kakhovka Reservoir. So Kakhovka Reservoir is one of the biggest. Was one of the biggest in Europe, because now it's drained. 3 regions of Ukraine use the water of Kakhovka Reservoir. So actually these regions and these soils feed around 80 million people, and they cannot produce the harvest anymore. And I mean, that the Ukraine, it's well known with wheat, grain, and everything, and we produce at least 5 times more than we can consume. So we still export our grain, but that is a huge problem. Was the changing of the climate of the whole part of Ukraine, the southern Ukraine, and I will emphasize was the whole ecology situation, that what we need and what we have to look at. First of all, it's the environmental damage assessment. So short, medium, and long-term environmental damage assessment, including the impact on human health and biodiversity conservation. And this covers the assessment of damage to natural areas and inhabited territories, all the natural resources, species, soils, air, forest, water, minerals, and also the pollution caused by various substances. Now, prosecution for environmental damage, and what we have done in that matter, maybe you've heard, but we established international working group on the environmental consequences of war, and it was launched in Kiev on June 29th. Maybe you saw Greta Thunberg in Kiev, a lot of Twitter posts and a lot of media coverage of that. But also, a lot of activists there, former Irish president. I just saw her in Kigali actually 2 weeks ago, a week ago. I have to acknowledge also that environmental point is in the peace formula of President Zelensky. So it's number 8, I think. Well, doesn't matter what the number. Yes, it's number 8 point, and it refers to environmental safety. It's about development and implementation of a comprehensive plan for a mental recovery of Ukraine on the consequences of the war. So it is, I just want to underline that, it is in the president's top priority. And actually, when we had a speech of President this February, when he addressed the parliament, he said that actually the green recovery and the green plan for Ukraine is the ultimate goal. So it is in the top priority. And of course, finally, the third point is the recovery and reconstruction, including the green economy transition. And so we should include the measures on Ukraine's environmental renewal, including land remediation and demining. As I said, we're the most polluted country with mines in the world. Revival of destroyed forests and nature reserves, creation of new national parks and natural protection zones, rivers, lakes, and seawater purification. So what Parliament does, this June, we adopted a law amending the laws of Ukraine on the restoration and green transformation of Ukraine's energy system. And the key goal in particular is energy decentralization and the creation of a branched energy system. So under this law, enterprises are now able to dispose of the electricity they generate with solar panels. And in this respect, we're approaching EU standards. you might know we're a candidate to enter EU, and we hope that the negotiation process starts by the end of this year. We are on this track with the reforms, and European Commission acknowledged that great progress of these reforms. Also, you probably know that we have a lot of have had a lot of Soviet era factories. It's a pity. I mean, a lot of people lost their jobs because these factories were destroyed. Russians just destroyed a lot of stuff, especially in eastern Ukraine, in the Donetsk region and everything. So it doesn't mean that we will rebuild all these old Soviet era factories with all the pollution they produced. And actually, in London, you probably heard about the Recover Conference in London this summer, this June, and actually ministry had signed the relevant memorandum was the steel industry. And our objective for the Recover Ukraine is the 3B rule. I don't think it's unique actually, but it's build back better. So that's the goal for Ukraine, build back better. And the green economy transition and the introduction of green technologies will be core components of this formula. And also by the end of October this year, the Ukrainian government will be working on a 4-year recovery and development plan for Ukraine, which should be supported by 50 billion euro in EU funding. And actually the private capital will be the basis. So I will conclude one thing. And that will approach actually part of what I do in humanitarian committee. I think that the core is information and education. So, and your foundation can play a significant role in that. So I urge you to fund the existing NGOs that promote principles of green policy and engage in educational and awareness-raising activities. It could be also green libraries. I myself supported green libraries in small cities around Ukraine. So what is basically green library? It actually has the room with books concerning consumption, green energy and everything, because that's where it all starts, from the communities. And also, like, even in my hometown, Turkey, Adrian knows where it is. He had some relatives coming from Turkey, but we have the organization called Green World Ecological and Humanitarian Association, and it works in Turkey, a small town, 34,000 people, since 1997. So I think these organizations need to get funded now. And more to open. And instead of conclusions, what I want to say is how we survive the next winter, this winter that comes very close and fast. That Russia deliberately destroyed energy infrastructure of Ukraine, and the next winter will be even worse than the one we experienced. I mean, if it wasn't the 27th of July, but the 27th of January, I would not have electricity in my apartment. I would not.
Yeah, I apologize. We should probably.
I'm concluding.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm concluding. And I think that anything you can do to help Ukraine to survive this winter, it could be EcoFlow, power banks, generators, and everything that could help concrete people in concrete cities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Yevheniya. Next up, we have Dario Liguti. He's the director of the Sustainable Energy Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, based in Geneva. And he'll discuss UN efforts in rebuilding Ukraine and his team's report on rebuilding Ukraine with a resilient carbon neutral energy system. Dario?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody. So I will start the next slide. I will go quickly. So first of all, what's the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe? It's part of the 5 regional commissions. We belong to the UN Secretariat, and as you can see, we're based in Geneva. We cover Europe, but in a broader sense, as you can see from the slide, we cover the whole of North America, the whole of Europe, and Central Asia. to a very wide region, a region which accounts for about 40% of the world GDP and 34% of its CO2 emissions. As I said, we are one of 5 regional commissions, and we translate the UN-wide policies and programs into the regions of our competence, and therefore this is where we're working. We've been obviously Ukraine is a member state of our regional commission, and a one which is very active and very engaged, of course, and the one has been as well a very important focus of our efforts. Next slide. So this is right. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so you can click as long as the contents come out. Thank you. And so this is, I will go through and show a little bit what we're doing in a number of areas around the different sectors that we are supporting Ukraine, and this is obviously is focused on Ukraine. So in the energy space, obviously, Ukraine is a very important country when it comes to the availability of critical raw materials for the energy transition, and therefore we're working with them. It has been one of the first countries that have actually adopted the UN methodologies when it comes for the critical raw materials, in particular the UN framework classification for resources, because it's one of the areas of potential development for the reconstruction and potential revenues in a decarbonized future. Next one. And here is the focus, I would say, that of what Adrian said, that we have worked with the Ministry of Energy in Ukraine and a number of other related ministries in preparing a roadmap towards a reconstruction of the Ukraine energy system with a view on a carbon neutrality. As Yevheniya said before, Ukraine is not going to rebuild the old Soviet infrastructure, which was heavily reliant on coal and other fossil fuels and gas, but obviously it will be projecting the country towards the decarbonized future, and therefore the whole reconstruction effort, as Yevheniya mentioned as well in the law that has been recently approved, is aimed at preparing and recreating, or whenever the conditions will be there, a green energy system for Ukraine. Next one, please. This is the study that we did here. So what does it say, basically? It says that there is a way for Ukraine to become almost independent from fossil fuels. As you can see, it's a long-term path. It has, on the short term, they will go towards reconstruction of the energy system for the provision of electricity and heating to the population. And you heard what Yevheniya said about last winter. More importantly, about next winter, what the Ukrainian population will have to face. So certainly, the first aid and the first support will come towards providing those minimum human basic needs. But with a view over the more long term, as you can see, we're looking at 2050 of creating the basis, and more importantly, to developing the infrastructure that is actually brings Ukraine to become less dependent on fossil fuels, not only from gas imports from other countries as was in the past, but as well from its own coal reserves as much as possible. These are some of the numbers, whether you're looking at industry or transport or buildings. Next one. So how is that going to take place? Well, certainly a very, very large effort will need to go into energy efficiency. As Yevheniya mentioned as well, the industrial sector and the building sector and the transport sector in Ukraine, unfortunately, we're still using technologies of the past, and therefore technologies which are very energy intensive. It's still a country before the war. Ukraine was a country which was already moving towards less energy dependence, but still with an important intensity, not only because of the industries where Ukraine has been specialized, which are steel, as you know, and cement, but as well because of the let's say the infrastructure, the legacy infrastructure of those industries, and therefore with high energy intensity. That is one of the first things that Ukraine is doing and will be doing in rebuilding its own energy, is to look at energy efficient technologies, whether in the industrial processes or in the built environment, for example, or as well in the transport, electrification of transport, for example. The second part will be, as Adrian mentioned at the beginning, through a wide deployment of renewable energy. Certainly, solar and wind has a huge potential, huge opportunities to grow, alongside a little bit of hydropower, not only reconstructing the existing hydropower infrastructure, which has been destroyed by the war, but most importantly, deploying in a massive way, both solar and wind power, both in a decentralized energy system, as Yevheniya mentioned before, but as well in a more centralized structure, and more very interesting, very importantly, biofuels. I mean, as you know, Ukraine is an agricultural powerhouse, not only for food agriculture, but as well for fuel crops. And here we have helped the Ukrainian government to understand what is the potential, and on the fringe land, i.e. the land that cannot be used for other purposes, or because alongside roads, for example, or the land that will be repurposed from the ecocide that is taking place into the country, could be used for the production of fuel crops, which will constitute a very important element in the decarbonization of the energy system in Ukraine. Next slide, please. One more. There you go. Perfect. Obviously, you know, all of this will entail a huge shift in the way the Ukrainian industry, but as well the Ukrainian society is built. This will have a huge social impact. I just remind you that the coal industry, and coal mining, and coal related activities in Ukraine are very, very important. And there certainly the focus that the restructuring or let's say the abandoning of the coal industry will have a huge social impact, and therefore a particular attention will have to be paid to what we call the just transition, which is giving the people who will be impacted negatively by the energy transition the opportunity to adapt their societies, their lives, their education, their generations, and their children well to the future. And therefore, certainly this will be a very important area as well when we get to the conclusions, where I think the foundations could help. Next one. We already talked about this, so we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Perfect. I think here I would like to bring your attention to some very important projects which have been recently launched. Yevheniya mentioned the situation in a specific city in Ukraine. We are working with a large number of partners in a small number of projects, but very important to set the example on how to rebuild urban infrastructure, overall cities. And Kharkiv is one of the first examples. Then we have the next slide, Mykolaiv as well, which are two cities which have been completely destroyed, if I can say, by the war. And therefore, we're starting, rebuilding the city from scratch. And here we're working with the mayors and the stakeholders and the NGOs locally in designing what will be the Kharkiv, what will be the Mykolaiv of the future, and in how you want to rebuild those cities in a sustainable way, of course. And here we're working with first-class international architectural companies that are providing those services for free to the populations, to the cities, to the mayors of these cities. And here I think the idea is not only, obviously, there are hundreds of cities in Ukraine that need those services, and hundreds of cities that need to be rebuilt. But we're starting with this to set a blueprint. So how would the Ukrainian people, with our support, rebuild the infrastructure tomorrow? Well, we're setting the blueprint with these projects. In the next slide, and we can see as well the Mykolaiv one. Here you are for Mykolaiv, on how these cities can be rebuilt with the participation of the population, of course. These master plans have been designed by the architects, and the mayor and the local administrations have been as well submitted to local to the opinions and comments of the local population to get their feedback and build a city which actually belongs to their inhabitants, and they feel that they are contributing to the future of the cities. Next slide, please. As you see, I mentioned a large number of stakeholders. We talk about 16 UN agencies plus other stakeholders with the NGOs involved, local NGOs which are playing a very important role, and financiers which are bringing, obviously financing, which will be bringing financing to the table. Here, there's another set of. You can click a couple of more. Which are bringing other areas of support to Ukraine, obviously, financing, providing financing for the reconstruction. Statistics are very important area. You can only build plans if you have data and accurate data. Next one, please. Environment, I think Yevheniya has said a lot. Ukraine is a party to 5 UNEC multilateral environmental agreements, including some of those that Yevheniya mentioned, to protect the environment, and therefore, obviously, we participated in the assessment that was mentioned by Yevheniya, but as well in the overall assessment that the World Bank and UNDP did when it came to recently to the estimation of the overall damage, not only the environmental damage, but the overall damage to the infrastructure, to the economy of Ukraine, which I recall as of March of this year was calculated to be $441 billion. So a massive amount of money. And since then, obviously, that unfortunately that has continued growing that amount of money because of the continuation of the war and the damage in Ukraine across the different aspects. Next slide, please. Transport, we talked about transport. Innovation, of course, very important. One more, please. Very important. And trade, of course, very important. I think it has been mentioned as well by Adrian at the beginning. The efforts that to support the continuation of economic activity in Ukraine, given the very harsh and very complex conditions, not least the grain that recently has been blocked and is not working anymore, and therefore supporting other avenues and the creation of other commercial flows through neighboring countries, and to support as well the development and the continuation of economic activities in Ukraine, which I recall it has suffered a massive GDP decrease due to the war. Already started in 2014, but since then has with a very large part of its country, of its industrial footprint as well, occupied by Russian forces. Next slide, please. So here I'm Adrian. I'm coming to what we see where the role of the foundations could play here. And in our view, first and foremost, humanitarian aid is obviously emergency, and it's response number one. And given the conflict situation and the winter, which will be starting in September in Ukraine, that should be obviously a very important focus of the support from the foundations. But we have to think, and as we have been working with the Ukrainian government on the reconstruction efforts, and as Yevheniya said as well, we're ready. The Ukrainian government, with the support of the international community, is already thinking about the next phase, already thinking about the reconstruction of that. I think that the foundation should start looking at what role and how they could support the reconstruction of Ukraine, which will take many, many, many years. So it's not just provision of humanitarian aid, which is again is of primary importance and is of it's very urgent and very necessary. But at the same time as well, it's a reconstruction. How that reconstruction, I would say, supporting the local NGOs, has already been said, drive change into Ukrainian society, including behavioral changes. As I said, support the social acceptance of that transition. We talked about just transition before. Skills development for the green economy. So very much in line with what Yevheniya said before. Using local NGOs, supporting the local NGOs, raising awareness of campaigns with internal and external stakeholders, and obviously supporting financially the reconstruction of the country. With that, Adrian, I'll give you back the floor. I'm ready to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Dario. And that's a great segue into our next speaker, Roman Zinchenko, co-founder of Greencubator, an NGO that's actually supporting sustainable development, green NGOs, local, basically local green ecosystem. Roman, take it away.
Adrian, thank you very much, dear colleagues. It's a great privilege to be with you, and it's also been a totally outstanding overview of the situation. But I would still try to adapt to it. So, in addition to being co-founder and head of Greencubator, I'm also a proud supporter and volunteer of Ukrainian air defenses, because most of Ukrainians are now somehow involved in supporting Ukrainian defense, and we are taking the noble job of providing some of the supplies and technologies to air defenses. But in the civilian life, I'm not in the military, but still we are connected. In my daily life, over 14 years, I'm busy working with the founders of Green Ventures. So our job is growing green GDP of Ukraine by empowering green entrepreneurship and climate innovators. So actually, basically what we do, we attract founders to the sector. We are making green innovations attractive and fashionable. We're helping them launch green ventures, and we are providing to them support and funding. So we are, unlike my colleagues, we are working on the very early stages. So we are providing grants to, for example, green social entrepreneurs in partnership with Civic. We are also operating one of Ukraine's largest grant programs to support clean tech entrepreneurs for EBRD and European Union. It's called Climate Innovation Vouchers. We're managing 1.5 million euros. And we have 2 more grant programs coming, would be announcing soon. We also helped shape some of the energy sector regulations in the previous years, and launched the Ukraine's first municipal energy cooperative in the city of Slavutich. Slavutich is the city that replaced Pripyat for serving Chernobyl nuclear power plant. And this municipal energy co-op, the solar station, has helped the city survive the power outages during the occupation last year. We also operate in the field of education and skills building. We have projects for training people like Greencubator Academy, which is online training platform, and we are partner of Climate Launchpad, which is world's largest green business ideas contest. So when we are starting our programs for startups, for early stage companies, I'm very often opening it with the optimistic statement, like optimistic bracketed, saying, okay, you know, the business you're in the business of dying, because the job of startups is normally dying. And if you survive, it's statistically abnormal. And that means we know a little bit about death valleys, about the reasons why companies die. And we have a strong prejudice towards entrepreneurs and businesses as a means of creating national wealth. So that's why we are focusing on them. So one of the key jobs we see now ahead, and maybe one of the tasks for philanthropic support of green economy, is increasing the capital availability for the next chapters of funding, for the Series A funding, for the funding after the seed stage, so more Ukrainians could launch their green ventures and could create green GDPs. But anyway, it's important to address numerous issues we are now facing during the Russian invasion in Ukraine, because the war is seriously changing economic structure. As Yevheniya and Dario already mentioned, we're export-oriented country. And like pre-war, we had 3 major sectors of export. Number 1 was agri-sector, which is now impacted by world's largest minefields, the destruction of Kakhovka hydropower plant dam, grain silos and port destruction, blocking waterways and threatening grain trades and civilian cargo. This sector number 2 was steel and metal industry. Well, we lost Azovstal, we lost Mariupol metallurgic plant, and the largest remaining steel plant, ArcelorMittal Kryvyi Rih, is being strangled with the water deficit as a result of Russian attack or destruction on Kakhovka dam. And the third sector is tech and software services in terms of export. Well, we are losing companies, employees, and also many clients are fleeing war risks. Still, Ukraine is a birthplace for many global great products. So some of them are based in Vancouver, for example, currently, like Grammarly, which has its Canadian hub in Vancouver. Some are based in Ukraine and Turkey, like Ajax. Some are moved practically mostly back to Ukraine, like PetCube. Some otherwise moved to LA, like e-bike developers, Delfast. And some are raising funds quickly, like Ukrainian competitor to Duolingo, Preply. So like Ukrainians are really good in innovations and creating innovations. And I believe that powering innovations and empowering innovators is essential task for making this segment happen. And I see 3 major directions for green recovery, and they are communities, and many great projects are already happening. Industries, because the industries are creating jobs, taxes, and motivating people to come back, and energy sector. And we should also take into account that while we do feel the climate change impacting agribusiness, impacting housing, and impacting energy. So if I should say, okay, what could foundations do to make this happen? I just have several points in that. The first thing, the first task is in the field of vision and capacities. Ukrainian energy system is resilient. Ukrainian workers of energy field did gigantic job keeping it operating after nearly destruction of major energy hubs, substations, and attacks from on the main generating capacities. But still, the Ukrainian energy policy is so full with the vision of gigantic Soviet-style projects that deserves to be changed. So it's important to educate the energy sector communities about the real decentralization. Then the next thing is regulation. Ukraine is currently the country of the most decentralized energy sources. Last year, Ukrainians imported almost 1 gigawatt worth of different distributed energy sources, generators, energy storage, and other systems. These solutions are not integrated into the grid, but they're providing valuable backup. But where the energy revolution would be happening in our country, I'm sure that would be happening behind the meter. And it's important that the national regulation is helping behind the meter revolution, not preventing that. And the final thing, Ukraine is on its path to join the EU. That would mean new standards, new materials, new building codes, and also new skills we would lack. So rebuilding infrastructure post-Soviet style is no more. We should build new green sustainable infrastructure. Getting back to the energy sector, Adrian, I believe I have 1 minute left, right? I can hear you.
How about 30 seconds? Okay.
30 seconds. Okay. Energy. Let's help energy sector develop the real flexibility and decentralization. Businesses. For businesses, well, you just should see what Ukrainian private sector is doing by rebuilding their operation in the occupied territories. Focus on the private sector, which is very efficient in Ukraine, and empower its green transition. And finally, 2 more things. First thing, the best preventer, the best blockage for green transition is lack of financing. Empowering long-term financing and empowering lower rates is essential. And finally, political transformation. we still have a very popular idea that Ukrainians are eager for very low energy prices. The generations of politicians are focusing on low prices in the energy bill. Fighting for low prices is killing the energy sector and killing many businesses. But Ukrainians already understand the real price of these so-called low prices. So educating political elites about them, that's also an essential thing to empower green transformation, competitiveness, and the next chapter of green development of Ukraine. And finally, I'm actually again, 1 second. I'm the big opponent of Build Back Better. Hey, we no longer need the Soviet systems. We no longer need the better Gulag. Let's build forward. Let's build Ukrainian Renaissance. And there's a lot of joint efforts American, Canadian, global philanthropies can do to empower that. And you have the ripe soil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman. Thank you to all our speakers. Please, to the audience, please go ahead and type your questions in the chat and we'll get to them right away. I'll just note that another example of philanthropy supporting environmental NGOs in Ukraine is the International Renaissance Foundation in Kyiv. They've provided grants to a dozen Ukrainian NGOs to help them build capacity and expertise. And that includes organizations such as Eco Action and Green Wave in Kyiv, Zero Waste in Lviv, Flora in Kropyvnytsky, Save Dnipro in the city of Dnipro, Ekoltava in Poltava, and the National Scouting Organization Plast. I guess I'll ask, since I'm not seeing any questions yet in the chat, Yevheniya, can you tell us, please, does the government, do you feel that it's important for Ukraine to have a very strong NGO and think tank sector devoted to green energy and environment? I mean, is that an expertise you feel you can rely on? Because we're talking to funders here today about fund NGOs, help them build capacity, that type of thing. So, and maybe Roman can then after that talk about, how do we identify, who we can help in Ukraine, who funders can help in Ukraine. Yevheniya, 1 minute answer, please, on the value.
Yeah, well, first of all, I noted that we should build forward better. I noted that. Another thing, how to build the capacity of NGOs. I'm going to be very straightforward. Ukrainian politicians have been influenced by oligarchs, by the guys who owned all these factories, mines, steel companies, also own TV channels that showed the politicians how, whatever, it's a closed circle. So I think these NGOs have to be very vocal, not just work and do the work, but also be pushing on the parliament, government, because I remember that all of the ecology legislation that was passed or had not passed yet, the parliament, was one of the most difficult ones to get the votes on, because you would have different corporations trying to influence members of parliament, government, not to change the rules, not to impose new ecology standards. And I think the capacity of being very public, very vocal, but also representing big masses and big parts of the society, it's very important to in this capacity building, I would say, to make it visible.
Roman, help us identify. How would you help us identify, NGOs in Ukraine or think tanks that funders can reach out to if they want to find out more how they can help? Yeah.
I have a little bit of conflict of interest here because Green Incubator is also an NGO formally, but we are looking about creating the Impact Venture Fund someday. But since you mentioned the International Renaissance Foundation, they already supporting great NGOs. Some of them you mentioned, And there are two more great think tanks they are supporting. The one is the Dixie Group, very vocal in the field of energy sector transparency, and another one is the Center for Energy Sector Research, also very impressive player in the field. But if we are speaking about the direct partners to work with, well, I'm really proud about some of the colleagues you mentioned. I'm really impressed by the work of, for example, Energy Act for Ukraine Foundation. They are doing great job creating the solar hospitals and solar schools. They're doing amazing job. The colleagues in the field, together with Eco Actions, are Eco Club Rivne, with the great work for again helping hospitals and public infrastructure get access to the solar field sector. So these are two impressive organizations. Speaking of other players, there is a growth in the field, and there are new players coming to the field. But I should say that there is a number of regional initiatives. Also, these are, for example, Ecoltava in Poltava. This is an amazing analytics center called Людина довкілля. Okay, the human and environment in Lviv. There are some other players. In this sector who are doing great job. So I would just send the links to several Ukrainian impressive. So again, I have a conflict of interest. They are my colleagues, but I'm really, really impressed and proud by the job they are doing.
Okay, thank you, Roman. We have a question in the chat here regarding what kind of mechanisms can be put into place to ensure that large flows of capital to rebuild Ukraine's infrastructure are accountable to the public. And also, this one is more for Dario. How about, is there something that the UN or other outside multilaterals can deliver a powerful message about the Ukrainian cabinet and parliament about types of things that might be done? And anybody would like to take that, Dario?
Maybe.
Yeah. Sorry, no, you're getting. Yeah.
Part.
Yes, please go. Yeah, I was going to propose that you should take the first part.
Yeah. So and it covers everything that it comes with the international aid. As you know, Ukraine has probably the biggest anti-corruption system in Europe, I would say, and probably bigger than United States or Canada. And it goes with the anti-corruption agency, the bureau, special prosecutor office, and the court. So that's the part that I think has to work, and it does work. Another thing about the being accountable to the public, I don't know if you've heard about Prozoro, which is Ukrainian system of tenders or whatever, everything that goes from local authorities, from central authorities, and it's public, and it has, the bids that goes from the companies. It's not perfect, but still it's better than what we had before, and probably what a lot of countries have before that is closed. So I'm strong supportive of Prozoro and all the auctions that go public on Prozoro. And of course, I'm the head of subcommittee of media policy, of informational policy. So I'm very pro the investigators, because they have to, to put this pressure on any government, on any parliament. I'm not saying about my government or my parliament, but the freedom of speech has to be there. It is there. We have great investigators, and they have to put pressure. And of course, I think it's also about the activity on the local level, because as I said, we have decentralization, and a lot of money are on the local level. And people, that's why I asked, not just supporting the NGOs in Kiev or in all of the NGOs, Adrian said, they are the regional centers, that none of them were from the level of the smaller cities. We have to build capacity in the smaller cities as well, because money are also there.
Great, Dario, if you could talk a little bit about
Yeah, sure. Yeah, from the donor community, yeah, there are two aspects I would like to put forward. The first one is a large part of the international community actors supporting the Ukrainian government and the institutions, both at local and at central level in Ukraine, in adopting obviously transparency standards and everything, putting in place anti-corruption mechanism and all of that stuff, and accountability procedures as well, etc. As Yevheniya mentioned before. And the result, some of the result is the platforms that are being established by the different state agencies or the different ministries when it comes to tendering, public tendering, for example, which aim to provide transparency in the tendering process when looking for aid. As well, Ukraine has launched a very important and is putting together a very important infrastructure to handle the incoming, aid for the reconstruction, which will be, as I said, on a massive scale, and therefore they are equipping themselves with a very powerful and very complex, down to the local administration level, way of using that. The second aspect is as well the international community, how we are organizing ourselves, because there is the whole world is supporting Ukraine, and I think here is very important that the international community acts in a coordinated fashion. We at the United Nations, for example, we coordinate ourselves through the UN resident coordinator, which is based in Kiev and who works hand in hand with the Ukrainian government, both at the central level and local level, in deploying all the support from the different UN agencies. But on the other hand, for example, the European Commission and the World Bank and the EBRD and the EIB have established a coordinating mechanism for their support from their side, and we collaborate with them. And so we're trying as well through that coordination as well, you're bringing transparency and you are dividing out and you're showing who does what, and you're creating accountability for those financial flows, for those aid flows that are going, and so and monitoring as well where they go and how they're used, and they should be used to the maximum impact.
Great, thank you so much, Dario. We have one final question to Roman. Are there any NGOs in Ukraine working at the neighborhood level regarding alternative energy, solar cooperatives, etc.? 1 minute for your answer, because we have to wrap up.
Thank you, Pete, for this question. That's probably our job, because on one hand, we were enabling the regulation for microgrids in Ukraine and the national grid code. And on the other hand, yes, my brother and co-founder Andriy Zinchenko is one of the major promoters of energy cooperatives and local level networks in Ukraine. So yes, we do have this type of experience, and we are working in this field. And actually, the program that was frozen with the start of war, and we are now working actually with the One Epstein Foundation you, Adrian, mentioned, is to unfreeze the project, which is called the Acceleration Program for Energy Co-ops and Small Grids. So we have that in the work. I hopefully that within months or two we would be able to finalize one cohort and open call for the new cohorts of people looking to create the small neighborhood level, community level energy projects.
Great, thank you so much, Roman. I should mention that Roman and his brother Andriy received an award from Stanford University, the Bright Award, for their work in sustainable energy development innovations at the local level. So we're coming to the end of our hour. I'd like to thank Yevheniya Kravchuk, Dario Leguti, and Roman Zinchenko for their wonderful presentations. I think they made a very convincing case that there are a lot of opportunities for supporting Ukraine's green economy future. A lot of work can be done in supporting and funders supporting non-governmental organizations, building capacity. So I hope it's been helpful to all the participants. Thank you for joining us today. And I turn it over to Melissa if she has any final remarks.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time today. Please stay tuned for the next roundtable that we will announce shortly. And until then, we will provide today's recording alongside resources. If you have any feedback or suggestions for how we can support your work, please reach out to any council staff or Adrian. Thank you again for today. Until then, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having us and for your work supporting Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Слава Україні.
Героям слава.